This is a quick overview on Enclomiphene, and there's going to be some stuff that's definitely left out of this presentation, but I thought that wasn't completely relevant, or maybe it is, like stuff like Half Life, but I just wanted to do a quick brief overview and not get too in depth unless that's what's asked for and requested. So we can start off by asking what is enclomiphene, and enclomiphene is a selective estrogen receptor modulator, also known as a SERM, and this probably looks pretty similar to a SARM, and then it kind of has a similar function with the whole selective portion with kind of correlates with SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and SNRIs, selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And this pretty much just means that it's selective to those receptors just in a certain part of the body or brain. And so um, the receptor that it's actually selective to is the estrogen receptors in the pituitary gland. And you'll notice, I mean, you have estrogen receptors absolutely all over your brain, but the ones, and your body, but the ones it's most selective to is going to be the pituitary gland, which is what gives it its main functions. And it's going to work on the negative feedback loop, which this is a very complex photo, so I'm just going to simplify it a bit to keep this, nice and quick. But pretty much negative feedback loops are used for multiple functions in your body, not just what I'm about to explain. But the one that I'm going to explain is going to relate to the function of the drug. And so this is your negative feedback loop normally. Your brain will produce LH and FSH, or luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, which is going to go down to the gonads, and that's going to activate spermagenesis and make testosterone. And then if you are a man, that testosterone is going to go through the aromatase enzymes and turn into estrogen, and that estrogen is then going to go back up to your brain, which I'm not going to get too specific and totally which parts, but it's going to go back up to your brain, and pretty much your body's going to maintain homeostasis, which is just like a balance, through this feedback loop. So testosterone doesn't get too high or hormones don't get out of whack. And just before I go more in depth on how it works, I just want to explain clomiphene because it's very similar to enclomiphene. Enclomiphene actually has enclomiphene in it. It's one of the isomers, and it also has zooclomiphene. But zooclomiphene pretty much just has some estrogenic effects, so it's much more advantageous to use just enclomiphene if you're using it for, post psychotherapy or increasing testosterone and stuff like that. Exactly, as more side effects and drawbacks, so it's just not really worth it. Then, before I get into how it works, I kind of just wanted to bring up aromatase inhibitors because I at least think it's pretty valid to bring these up with the mechanism that we're talking about of the negative feedback loop, because aromatase inhibitors are also commonly used for post psychotherapies and stuff like that. And they just block aromatization that we talked about earlier. It's pretty much just gonna inhibit the enzyme from doing its job, so they won't end up aromatizing into estrogen, so estrogen levels will decline. So the first thing I'm gonna explain is how actually the negative feedback loop changes on aromatase inhibitors, and that's gonna look a bit like this. So the aromatase enzyme is obviously not working as well, which is going to lead to a decrease in estrogen. Since you have a negative feedback loop that wants to maintain homeostasis in your body, your brain pretty much just reads your estrogen drop And as a response, it's going to increase luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which is going to increase sperm production and increase testosterone. Um, and that's pretty much your body's response to fighting low estrogen. And now let's look at how enclomiphene works. This is where it gets pretty interesting. Is There's a chance that you get a spike in absolutely everything, which can sometimes be more favorable, sometimes be less favorable. But pretty much, enclomiphene is going to bind to those estrogen receptors responsible for the negative feedback loop in your brain, which is going to lead to an increase in luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, increasing sperm and testosterone, which is going to go through aromatase, leading to an increase in estrogen, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I mean it's pretty good to have a nice balance. Like you don't want to crush estrogen. It's there for a reason, and there's pretty nasty side effects that come with too low estrogen. So if you don't push the envelope here, it can actually be more beneficial than using aromatase inhibitors. And now, finally, I just want to answer some quick questions a lot of people ask. Does it build muscle? And the quick answer is not really. It obviously increases testosterone, but what comes with that is also an increase in SHBG, which is going to control how anabolic the environment in your body is. So that's probably going to go up. So it all goes up in conjunction, to maintain this homeostasis. And there's obviously stuff that you can combine with enclomiphene to make it actually more favorable and more anabolic, which I want to talk about because I think it's some pretty interesting stuff. But I'll get to that later. So it hasn't really been shown to add that much benefit to gaining muscle. It's definitely more favorable as a PCT because, who knows if you do a cycle when maybe estrogen is low from the cycle, crashing it even more just might not be the best response. And then obviously stacks is what I want to talk about later. But that is pretty much it. And thank you for listening.